Welcome back to The Explainer. Now, we hear about global climate change all the time, right? But here's the thing. While the problem is absolutely global, the reality on the ground, it's completely unique depending on where you're standing. Every single country is dealing with climate change right now, but they are absolutely not facing it in the same way. The solutions, just like the impacts, have to be incredibly localized.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because this stark contrast completely shatters the illusion of a one-size-fits-all catastrophe. Just look at this. On one hand, you've got India literally baking under these record-breaking, blistering heat waves. And then, flip a switch, and right next to it, the Arctic is experiencing the exact opposite extreme, a massive, rapid melt of ancient ice. So yes, the planet as a whole is warming, but the symptoms, they are incredibly localized and vastly different.
So, here's our flight itinerary for today's explainer. We're going to start with one problem local impacts, then do a deep dive into India's high priority crisis. After that, we'll hit the heat and fire zones, move on to drought and vanishing lands, and wrap up with the data-driven global strategy and our road to 2050.
All right, Section 1, one problem, local impacts.
You can think of this kind of like a massive domino effect. It starts broadly with global warming, which then triggers regional climate change. But when that hits local geography and economies, boom, you get highly specific country-level problems. The big takeaway for us here is that because these issues are so deeply customized by local geography and industrialization, there's absolutely no silver bullet. We desperately need custom ground-level solutions. And you can really see that reality playing out in the data. Look at Asia. The main issue there is severe heat waves. It's a high risk and it's immediate. But jump over to Africa and the threat entirely shifts to critical water scarcity, which is an extreme, absolutely critical risk right now. Europe is battling a brutal combo of heat and fires, while the Arctic is facing urgent, extreme ice melt. It's wild, right? The urgency and risk levels fluctuate wildly just by dragging your finger across the map.
To actually make sense of all this, scientists use something called the Climate Risk Zone Model. Basically, think of this as a mental map for the exact stakes we're dealing with. You've got high-risk areas, like coasts facing severe flooding, medium-risk zones dealing with intense agricultural drought, and then extreme risk. I mean, these are literal existential threats to places like small island nations and the Arctic. Keep this framework in the back of your mind as we go through these different regions.
Moving on to Section 2, High Priority, India's Crisis.
Now, what's really interesting and honestly terrifying about this is the tragic chain reaction. Searing 40 to 50 degrees Celsius temperatures don't just feel hot. They directly cause devastating water shortages. That lack of water then triggers massive crop failures, which absolutely hammers the economy, and ultimately forces people into mass climate migration just for basic human survival. It's a brutal domino effect.
But India's position is actually this incredibly fascinating balancing act. On one hand, they have an enormous opportunity. I mean, their potential to build a powerhouse green economy using their massive solar capacity is huge. But that is actively racing against the immense, looming threat of climate migration in a severely populated country. It's literally a race against time between their green potential and their demographic vulnerabilities. So, how do you even begin to tackle something that massive? Well, you need a multi-tiered approach, and the India model shows this perfectly. At the top, the government is rolling out aggressive solar expansion and intense heat action plans. Then, businesses are being forced to adapt. Think green infrastructure and strict ESG compliance rules. And right down at the individual level, everyday citizens are doing the groundwork with water saving and tree planting efforts. It's an all-hands-on-deck situation, from lawmakers all the way down to you and me.
Okay, Section 3, the heat and fire zones.
So we're looking at the USA and Europe here. It starts with intense heat just baking the earth into dry kindling for massive wildfires. But here is the really terrifying kicker. As those forests burn, they release massive amounts of trapped carbon dioxide right back into the atmosphere. What does that do? It creates even more heat. It's a vicious feedback loop, where the very forests supposed to protect us are actively accelerating the warming that caused them to burn in the first place. And make no mistake, this is entirely a transatlantic burden. We're sharing this crisis. Look at Europe's parallel struggles here. You've got France battling severe, totally unprecedented heat waves, while countries like Greece are dealing with utterly devastating wildfires. The exact same symptoms of this heat and fire crisis are erupting across entirely different continents at the same time.
But, these zones are definitely fighting back hard.
Over in the US, they're pushing heavy into clean energy transitions, smarter forest management, and some really advanced carbon capture tech. Meanwhile, Europe is aggressively scaling up renewables, locking in strict legislative climate laws, and even developing smart cities to adapt to these new extremes. They aren't just sitting there. They're attacking the problem with massive structural shifts.
That brings us to Section 4, Drought and Vanishing Lands.
So the crucial point here is the agonizing reality for much of Africa. We're talking about regions where a simple lack of rainfall very quickly spirals into severe drought. That leads straight to catastrophic crop failure, and without crops, widespread hunger inevitably plunges the entire region into deepening poverty. Just a shift in weather patterns creates a massive, cascading humanitarian crisis.
Now watch how this connects two entirely different parts of the globe. Global warming melts Arctic ice at the very top of the world, but of course that water doesn't just stay there. It creates rising sea levels across the entire planet, physically drowning small island countries thousands of miles away. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. The melting top of the world is literally erasing the geography of islands far below it. Because of this, the localized solutions here are desperate but absolutely essential. Notice the stark contrast in these strategies. In Africa, it's all about survival through agriculture, building water harvesting systems, planting highly climate-resilient crops. But for the islands in the Arctic, the reality is pretty grim. They are literally drafting climate relocation plans, begging for global financial support, and pushing the world for strict emission reductions to save whatever land they actually have left.
Let's zoom back out. Section 5, the data-driven global strategy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive paradigm shift we're in the middle of right now. To support all these wildly diverse, localized solutions we just talked about, we have to look at the macro level. The old traditional approach, it was slow, reactive, and way too reliant on fossil fuels. But the future of global policy, it has to be data-driven, powered by renewables, and above all, predictive. We literally have to know what's coming before it even hits us. So here is how that continuous global master model actually works. First, we identify the threat, but the real magic happens in step 2, where we gather immense amounts of data using AI and satellite monitoring. We use that precise data to form highly targeted policies, implement them, and then relentlessly track the results, so we are constantly improving. It's not just a plan, it's a living, breathing defense system.
Finally, Section 6, the road to 2050.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds across 3 absolutely critical phases. Phase 1, right now from 2025 to 2030, demands massive renewable expansion and tightening up those strict climate policies globally. Then, in Phase 2, from 2030 to 2040, we have to transition to true net zero emissions, which means removing exactly as much carbon as we produce, all while building out smart, resilient infrastructure. If we manage to hit those crucial marks, we reach Phase 3 by 2050, ultimate climate stabilization.
So here's the thing. The customized solutions exist. The advanced predictive technology, it's already sitting right here. But the real question is, will we actually adapt our local strategies in time to save our global future? The roadmap is drawn. Humanity just has to decide if we're brave enough to follow it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I'll see you in the next one.